בורכי נפשי אס השם
Chapter 10. We're about to start the new avenue, the new chapter. And since we're getting close to Shabbat, just a word of a Torah before we begin our session. This Shabbat is Parashat Shmot, beginning of the book of Shmot, of Geula, of Exodus. And we can learn a lot of lessons from the story of Moshe Rabbeinu, of Moses and Egypt and Exodus. But one of the key lessons that we can all learn is the idea that you do a favor to someone, you do something good to someone, you help someone with something, and you get slapped on your face. Such as, imagine if you lend money to someone and he or she did not return it on time, on the conditions. You do a favor to someone and then instead of doing good, he bad-mouthing you. So sometimes a person may feel, you know what, I'm not going to do it again. I did it once, twice, I get it from people, forget it. The truth of the matter, that sometimes those conclusions are against the Torah. Why? Because the Torah said, Im kesef talve tami et ha'ani imach. So it means we should give a hand to people who are poor. We should help people. Yes, we need to make sure that we have it back. We need to make the proper way, the contract, the witnesses, whatever needed. But here you see a good example of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses went out and he saw the suffering of the Jewish people, while two people, Datan and Aviram, one Jew, lift up his hand to hit another Jew. And what Moses said is only 3 Hebrew words, Lama takere echa. Why did you hit your fellow? Now think together with me. What did he do wrong here? He tried to help these two people fighting against each other. Now what having in a return is not just one person. Both of them said, Mi samcha leish, who made you the one who in charge here? You are not in our age, you are not in our status, Sar v'shofet aleinu. You are not wealthy as us. Halehorgeni ata omer, you're planning to kill me as you killed the Egyptians. And as a result they ran and informed Pharaoh, and Pharaoh tried to kill him and he needed to run away for his lives. So this is a tragedy. What is the regular reaction of people in these type of instances? Person said, guess what? I try to do good for other people. I try to give them a favor, to do them a good deed. If they don't appreciate what I'm doing, if they slapping on my face instead of saying thank you, I'm not going to do it again. But Moshe Rabbeinu, however, he went an extra way. When he ran away to Midian, he sat there. And the Torah said he saw the daughter of Yitro, of Jethro. They are pulling out the water from the well to feed their animals. And the shepherds purposely standing there, waiting for them to do the job, and then try to run, either the two interpretations, either to take the water from them and feed their animals, or to rape them. And the Torah said that again, Moses stick his nose. Vayakam Moshe vayoshi'an. Moses went and ran away and hit those shepherds, didn't let them do it, hold them away, gave the daughters of Yitro to feed their animals, the way that they collected this hard labor of taking water. And if you think about it, again, you're sticking in a place that no one knows you, you're sticking for the good, and the result, the shepherds tried to hit him. It was all big to do, but he did it because that was the will of God, that was the right thing to do. Then the Torah said that this daughter of Yitro, they went to her father, they told him, and he asks to have him. So we learn a deepest lesson, that Hashem granted him, because he did all these good deeds, that he get his bashert, he get his proper wife, he get this great woman, the great Tzipora, because of that. Otherwise, if he didn't need to run away from Pharaoh, he didn't stick for those girls, who knows if he gets his proper wife. But here Hashem show how good deeds never turn away from the Lord. God makes sure that the person get the proper reward for good deeds. The Torah go further to say that another daughter of Putiel, Mary Elazar, his nephew, again, that it's a act of the same good deed that Moshe Rabbeinu did. So you see the same story of Joseph, that in the Potiphar, that he did so much good and he ended up in a jail, and he did so much good for the Sarah Mashkim, and he ended up with all of this extra years in jail. But he tried to help the nation, tried to help his brothers. So you learn all of that from all of that stories, that in the way of the Torah we should remember that sometimes even you get slapped on your face, even people do it in the wrong way, do not appreciate you, do not do the right thing for you. We have to do what we have to do, what is the right thing to do, stick in the way that the Torah instructed us. Doesn't mean that we need to lose faith, lose money, or lose trust, but we have to conduct ourselves in such a way that sometimes we have to go an extra mile to help other people. And that's the very important lesson from Moshe Rabbeinu. With that in mind, we go to chapter 10. In chapter 10, it's not just a continuation of discussion in regards to caring, but here we open up an extra question, such as, since we talk about measurement of caring, now what happens if there is another person carried together with you? What happens if the measurement of caring is so small that it's below than like the olive bulb? And what is the whole idea of domain? Again, the clear definition of domain in order to make a person liable. We learn in the seventh chapter that the minimum requirement for carrying from one domain to another, it's if a person carries something that people usually use, each person for whatever he needs, a small bag for certain food, or in a liquid is revi'it. So now we're dealing with, for example, with seeds and things like that is in a size of grogeret. Hamatzniya literally meaning someone who's stores, but doesn't mean store for storing. Store meaning that he pre-planned or set it in advance. המצניע לזרע ולדוגמה ולרפואה והוציאו בשבת חייב בכל שיעור. If one stores seed for sowing or for sample or for the to have some medical purposes and carry it out of a public domain on Shabbat, so he is liable in any size, in any amount. It's no, the Tosfot said that because he designated for something, so it means that it's important for him, and therefore any amount he is liable. וכל אדם אין חייב עליו אלא כשיעורו. So each person that store, he is liable for whatever he store only in the measurement that we mentioned in the early chapters. For example, if you remember, we talk about 5 seeds, five wheat seeds, or remember we talk about the Egyptians' seeds, etc. All these examples that we hold in the size that people make it as it's important for people. Now, if you already store it, chazar vehichniso. Now, after he stored it, here Rashash said, return it again. No chayav ela keshiuro. Now, for bring it back, he is liable only to the measure for liability. So, in other words, it's not more than that. And because it's only in the mind of the person, because he thought originally to use this small measurement, so that retroactively, whatever he thought earlier, it's annulled and it's like everyone else. It's not specifically for his measurement. So the GEMARA asks, Lama leile mitnei hamatzniya? Why do we need to say store? Litnei hamotziz lezera uldugma velirfu'a chayav bechol shur. We should say that that if someone carried for the intent of planting a seed, planting to have a medicine purposes, because people usually don't bother to move just a small size of a dry bark. People don't bother with such amount. So they said, Amar Abaye, Achav ma'asken k'gon she'isniyo v'shachach lama itzniyo. Did it ever happen to you that you call someone and the fellow answer the phone and then you're stuck? You don't remember to whom you call. Did it ever happen to you?
Oh yeah.
So Abaye said, here a situation with what we are dealing here, we're dealing with a case when one store for a very specific purpose, and then he forgot why he stored it. V'hashta kamapik leistama, and now he carries it out without a specific purpose. Now at the top of our page 91a, mahu detema batulei batla machshavto kamash melan kol haoseh al da'at rishona hu oseh. You may say that since intention was completely nullified. Why? Because he already retroactively thought that he stored for certain purposes, and now when he forgot, when he carries it, for what purpose he did it, so it's not any importance for doing that. So they come and tell us that whatever any actions that the person performs, so you go to the original intention in his mind. So the original thought, it's not annulled, only if you made it in a very, very clear statement. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Now we elaborate on that. Mechayev haya Rabbi Meir af b'motzi chita achat lizri'ah. He said that Rabbi Meir deemed liability even one carries a single wheat seed for sowing on Shabbat. So in other words, even that small amount. So GEMARA said Pshita, that's obvious. So they said Kol she'utnan, we said any amount. Ma'u deteima kol shehu le'apukei migrogeret. You may say that any amount, it means to exclude, to what? To grogeret. Grogeret is a dried fig bark. So that's not included, that you don't need such a measurement. Even that a person is not liable until it be in the olive bark side and not kolshu, and not in any measure. Kamash melan, so come and teach us that any amount refers to even a single seed. Chita achat. Matkif la Rav Yitzchak Breder Rav Yehuda. So here Rav Yitzchak Breder Rav Yehuda are raising a very strong objections. אלא מעתה חישב להוציא כל ביתו, אך אינם לא מחייב עד יפיק לכולי. Even a person thought to do what? To take his entire house, all the whatever he has in his entire house. So now you only make him liable, only he really carried the entire house. So you can't say such a thing, that if he didn't take the entire house in one shot, if you take it step by step, it doesn't carry any liability. So the Meiri said here, and the Ran said here, that the same way as Abaye said that it's okay to use the thought retroactively. before he made it. So and he said that it's not Ra'ui, it's not for that. So the same way you can have the thought in a retroactive thought before you even carry it, something that it's not Ra'ui, that a person cannot pull out the entire house in one time. Hatam, so the Gemara responded, and they said over there, Batla da'ato etzel kol adam. It's no such a thing that a person, the Pnei Yoshua said, that doesn't have some meaning or some is important, even some part of his house. So even a person that is a most unmaterialistic person, still he have some important items in his house. So the fact that it's a thought, unusual thought, or he thought they're all together, so they said, but ladato, his intention is rendered irrelevant by the opinion of all the other people. So it means that most people not conduct themselves in this manner. So they said in the Mishna, v'chol adam she'en chayavim alav ela keshiuro, that whatever he store is in the measurement that we said in the early chapters, matnitin klal. So this Mishnah, klal amar de lo Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. The Mishnah is not according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, the Tanya. Klal amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. This the principle Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, kol she'eno kasher le'atzniya ve'en matzni'im kamo. Whatever it's not proper for storing, and usually most of the people don't store such a small amount, even for something that is good for use. So, but people made it as something commonly used, and he stored it in order to use it. And someone else came out and put it out and stored it on Shabbat in public domain. That in a way, Mr. B carried the thought of Mr. A. It's not like Mr. A now, he lended his thought, or Mr. B pull out the thought and responsible for the thought of Mr. A. So it means, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, the person who stored his original thought, even his just original thought of Mr. A, already hold liability to anybody else who used that thought to carry. So in other words, the thought of the original person, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, it's enough to make the carries such a manner, such important, even as a manner of work, even by somebody else, even by a stranger. So there is a book called Or Sameach that he, in Hilchot Shabbat, chapter 18, have a lot to say about it. But the whole idea of, think about it, Mr. A did something, have his thought involved, and then Mr. B come and he's responsible for the thought of Mr. A who originally made it. So it's a lot to discuss, especially those who are involved with the laws, attorneys, and others. There's a lot to discuss over that. Okay, now we go to the next step. We said that if someone pull out an item, and before he put it down, so his thought at that time is not only obligated him, he can obligate someone else who is involved with that. How? Amar Rava Amar Rav Nachman, hotzi grogeret ki grogeret la'achila. If a person take a size of grogeret, it's a seed bark, to eat, v'nimlach alei lezriya. So he thought originally to do what? To eat it, and then he changed his mind, and what did he do now? He planting it as a seed in the ground. Inamei lizriya v'nimlach alei la'achila. It's a seed that most probably you can do both. You can plant it in the ground or you can eat it. And he originally planned to put it in the ground, and now he changed his mind and he want to eat it. So they said he's liable chayav. So they said pshita. It's obvious. Zil hacha ika shiura. Regardless if you go by the thought of the person that he thought of eating it, so it's the size of the gogeret, small seed box, so it's enough to say that he is responsible for hotza'at ochlin, that he carries the food. V'zilacha ikashura, And if you tell me that the whole thought is in regard to planted as a seed, so if they have the small measurement, the minimum measurement, that even one small seed is enough for planting, as we learn in Mishnah, so it makes no difference. So why are you saying all of that? So Mao de Teima May, you say, Be'inan akira ve'anacha bechad ha'machshava. That's fantastic. Which means the whole obligation, if you remember when we discussed in the early chapters in this book, in this Tractate Shabbat, so we said in order to make a person responsible and obligated and liable for Shabbat, is only if he completed the uprooting, the akira, from one domain, for example from the private domain, and hanacha, and putting down it in a public domain. And as long as he doesn't have the both idea of akira, uprooting, and hanacha, and lifting it and putting it elsewhere, so he is not obligated. But here, since you have just one part, you don't have both, because he thought to eat and now he planted the seed, or he thought to plant the seed and now he eats it. Vehaleika. So here you don't have both akira and hanacha. So maybe he is exempt. So the Gemara said kamash melan. So therefore Rav Nachman wants to tell us no. So as long as he doesn't have the retroactive thought, and as long as he have this one thought, and which is planning it to do something, either eating or planting a seed, even both, it was not in his original thought, but it's already make him liable. I think that's fascinating. By Rava said, Hotzi chatzi grogeret lizri'ah. If he took below the size that obligated the person, which is the grogeret, you remember we said a seed bud, and he took half of that, just for the sake of understanding. Vetafcha, venimlach ala l'achila mao. All of a sudden, that small become big. How that can happen? Either he soak it with water, either it's a hot temperature. It's a lot of options. What happened to that seed that suddenly it become bigger? So even he planted originally to have it as planting a seed, so it's enough for one seed to make him obligated. So now here he used a half, because second part said as follow. Im tematze lomar, if you tell me, and by the way, my interpretation, my explanation is, I'm paraphrasing the Ritva, which is a beautiful here. Hatam hu demechayev, over there, the reason that he is liable is because the zil hacha ikashiura, vezil hacha ikashiura, because regardless if you go this way or that way, they have a minimum measurement, which means in the time that he uprooted, it's enough to make him liable because he thought about something. Yes, that's thought. So we go retroactively by one part, and at that time it was the size of Gogeret, and then when he put it down, right, did a hanacha, it's the size of Gogeret, so it's regardless if he eats it or he planted it. So it's no difference. In other words, when he changes his mind between the akira, uprooting, and hanacha, putting it down, so it's in a way they have two different reflections, two different thoughts. So what we learned earlier, that Rav Nachman said that this will not basically annul the original thought of both akira and hanacha. But here, if you need the minimum amount of what? Of shi'ur, so regardless the time, if it's the uprooting akira or hanacha, makes no difference. So they said hacha, here we speak about half a gogeret, kevan de be'inan de apka lo have shi'ur achila. Because at the time that he uplifted it, it was not in a size that makes it important as meal, as a food, right? Lo michayav, he is not obligated, right? Because even originally when he uprooted, Rashi said, he intended to plant it, right? But since he changed his mind, and now instead of planting it as a seed, he eats it, retroactively, huvrar hadavar, we understand retroactively that this uprooting has an intent to do something in violation, which is hanacha, to put it down. So therefore, you may say that it may not considering a full melacha, because the big question is if that half a job makes him liable. So or dilma, or you can go the other way around, and you said kevan de ilu ishtik velo chashiv alei, which is originally he pulled out the seed and he didn't think about anything but only to plant it. Michayev machshava dezri'ah. So he is now obligated because originally he thought to plant it. So that thought, it's already caused him to be liable, right? Which means that the minute he lifted up, even it didn't happen in full, but that's already make him liable. Hashta namei michayev. Even now he changed his mind, and instead of planting it as a seed, he ate it, because now after it's puff up, and it's now the measurement of grogeret, so the second thought, it's more than the measurement that needs for the first one. So you see here the dilemma. And he goes further and he said, Ve'im timatze lomar, but if you come and said, Kevan delo ishtik velo chashiv alei, because he didn't have a new thought, mechayev machshava dezri'ah, because originally he thought of what? Of planting it as a seed. Hashta namei mechayev. So now he is already obligated, as we said earlier. Or if imotzi kegogeret la'achila vetzamka, let's go other way around. He took it in the size of grogeret and now it becomes smaller. So now lizri'ah mao, v'nimlach alea lizri'ah mao. So now originally what he wants to do, he wants to eat it. Now all of a sudden he realized that that is so small, it makes no sense to eat it. So what did he do? He planted in the ground. What's the halacha? Since here he display equanimity, right, and he doesn't thought about planting it as a seed, he is not obligated over the original thought that he thought to do one thing, to eat it. Or dilma batarashtas dinat. Or we go by the what happened in reality now at this very moment. The third question here, the third loop is ve'im timatze lomar batar hashtaz linan, and if you tell me we go by what's happened now in reality, umechayev, that you go after his thought that he is thinking now when he planting the seed, and therefore is liable. So he said, or opposite way, hotziki golgeret la'achila vetzamka. If he took a side of golgeret and now all of a sudden it becomes smaller, vechazra vetafcha mao, and all of a sudden it puff up before he planted. What's the halacha? So let's clarify. The Gemara said, yesh dichui linyan Shabbat or en dichui linyan Shabbat. Now listen carefully. It shows you the different halacha between, for example, nezikin and Shabbat. What did we say in nezikin? If you thought, okay, if let's call him Reuven, he planning to do what? He planning, for example, to clean the roof. His intent is to move stone in the roof. And now all of a sudden someone passed by the building and Reuven moved the stone and unintentionally killed someone else, right? Or if you intend to throw something, to cut something, and all of a sudden that spar that you let's say nowadays you shoot bullets intent to practice something, and all of a sudden it's moved around, it's redirected, and he damaged something or someone, what do? You always go by what? But what happened in reality, not by your original intent, right? That's in Ezikin. Here you ask in Shabbat, since he did it two different things, we said one is akira and one is anacha, one is pulling out and one is the lifting and put it elsewhere. So do you say that if originally he intended to do one thing and other thing happened, or during the course of time something happened, so either you said since it meanwhile in the process it changes status, such as they have grogeret become a grogeret, and from the size of grogeret, since he puff up, he's obligated. Or you said, or ein dichui le'inyan Shabbat, that original thought that when he lifted up, that's make him liable for the sin offering. That's already make him liable. So in other words, we end up by saying teiko, meaning tishbi et tiretz kushiyot ve'abayot. When in Mitzvah Hashem we see at the time of Messianic era, and Eliyahu Hanavi will come, he will clarify and explain how we go. Do we go by the original thought or not? What exactly we have to. But you see the beauty of this discussion when it's come to this. Do you go the whole safek, or Bekiva Iger said sfek sfeika, it's or the Sdei Chemetz sfek sfeika mitapech, is the whole question is, do you go by his original thought? You go by the reality of action? Do you go by the process between his thought and the actions? Or even further, if you go by the changing of status of the item itself? So, as an example, since we have a X amount of measurement, such as grogeret, how do you go about to make him liable? What exactly it changes status? Do you say that just because originally he planning, for example, to have it as a food, that's it? He is liable or not liable? Or you said because of the process that changed, that's making him liable? Or what happened in reality, the final point? Be'amina, another question in regard to very similar situation. Rava merav Nachman, zarak kezai truma lebayit tameh ma'u. If someone throw, you remember we talk a lot about throwing item on Shabbat. If someone, for example, is a dead body in a house. So what we said in regard to impurity, that if it's a dead body in the house, there is din of ohel bemet, that everything under that tent become impure. So now the question is, if he throw something, for example a truma, something that is consecrated for the holy purposes, and he put it to the house that it's already impure because, for example, there is a dead body there, what's the adin? What's the halacha? Lemai, what's the question? I le'inyan Shabbat. If you're speaking about the question on Shabbat, since he throw a olive size of truma, right, from the public domain to a private, a impure house, which is basically a private domain, ki grogeret ba'inan, we need to have the minimum of grogeret, that small size of the seed bark. Why? Because it's called hachnasa, because he basically moved from one domain to another. From what? From the public domain to the private domain. Now, or basically kezait, the olive bark, is below than grogeret. So if it was kezait truma, you may say that he's not liable. Ili inyan tum'ah, if it's in regard to the law of impurity, kebeitza ochalin ba'inan, we need to have the size of the egg in the Hilchot Tumah v'Tahara, which means the GEMARA tells us, there's several places, it's in the Tractate Psachim 33 and more, that you need to have a size of a egg in the law of purity or impurity. So what exactly is so he said Olam le'inyan Shabbat. Here the question is not in purity, law of purity, but it's in law of Shabbat. וכגון דאיקה פחות מכביצה או חלין. And here we speak about situation that you have below than egg or food. והי משלימו לביצה. Since you throw it inside the house, so it's together משלימו in the size of an egg. What's the halacha, what's the din? מי דמצטרף לעניין טומאה מחייב נמי, because by throwing so both together it carries a importance for throwing that item, or מחייב נמי לעניין שבת, it's the same as even a smaller size than kezait, which is the gogeret, or dilma לעניין שבת כגוגרת באילן. Or we said no, in regard to Shabbat we have this size of gogeret. So if it's below like kezait, is not obligated and therefore is exempt. So Rav Nachman answered, Amar lei tenitua. We learn in another braita. Abba Shaul Omer, it's the name of Rabbi. Shtei alechem velechem apanim shiuran kegogeret. He said that the shtei alechem, you know that in the Torah they have these two loaves that they use for the Beit HaMikdash, and also it was the showbird that was in a temple. So he said that that's the minimum is gogeret, is a dry fig bark. And the Gemara asks, Ve'amai, why you need this size? Leima, may you said mi dele'inyan yotze kevezayit. May we say that with regard to the matter of disqualification, it's may of this item that they carry a consecrated, like kedusha, so due to the living of the temple. So it's a significant measure is what? Kezait, an olive bark. Li'inyan Shabbat, name kezait. So with regard to Shabbat, also we need the amount of kezait. We are just turned to page 91b. Said, so we rejected, and we said, Hache ashta. Hatam, is that a proof? Hatam over there in the loaf of the temple, right? The showbird and the loaf. It's speak about mide'apkei chutz lechomat ha'azara. Here we speaks about a person who carry it out of the temple courtyard. Ipsilei beyotze. So a person he is make it pasul, invalid, by carrying it outside of the temple courtyard. Shabbat lo mechayev ad shemapik lirshut harabim. On Shabbat he is not obligated on only if he take it where? To a public domain. So when a person carry that loaf bread outside of the courtyard, regardless if he take it in those days in the east side, in the women's section, or take it in the other location there, so only if he gets more than 10 hands cubit in the place that they have the partition outside of the temple courtyard, it make it invalid. That's what we study in Midot, chapter 2. But other places, it's considering a private domain in regard to Shabbat, because as long as they have partitions, so it's not an issue. So the Khatam Sofer said that here it's a issue, because the only time that you said that his thought make it happen, make it liable, only in the other matter, but not in regards to Shabbat. Hacha. But here, when a person throw to a house that they have a corpse, that they have a dead body, Shabbat vetuma bahadei hadadei ka'atyan. Here, Rashi said that both the law of impurity and law on Shabbat hold together in a sense of liability, because it's not put together with other food that you have already in the house. So even you say that it's important and it's very important, but Tosfot tells us here that the minutes that the item it's already lifted and get to that spot, it's already combining with the food that is already there. Which means, let's trace the situation. You have a house, and all of a sudden you have a corpse there. So the food there, it's become what? Impure. Now, by throwing food from domain that is pure to that domain, that food now is connected. It's like one domain of impurity. Even originally that piece of food was originally in domain of purity. The same in Shabbat. We go, Tosfot said, by what happened in the bottom, the end, and it's mitztaref. So here, because of all of that, we didn't reconcile what Rabbi asked. It's still up in the air, in that sense. Remember the teiko, so we said in the Mishnah, after a person took a size of a small measurement that he stored, chazar v'ichniso, he now changed his mind and he put it back. Eino chayav ela keshiuro, he is liable only in the measurement that we said. So they said pshita, that's obvious, because it's clear that what we said, that who changed his mind? Not the seed, not the item, he changed his mind. So what's the point here? So Amar Abaye Acha b'ma yaskinan, Abaye said here what we're speaking at kegon, in a situation that he did not clearly express his thought, that he thought to plant it independently. That's the Rashash explanations. But only what? Shezrako la'otzar, but he put that small amount together with his treasure, which is, for example, other food items, that basically he retroactively annulled the original thought because he didn't store it independently now. But anyway, komo nikar, because you look carefully, you see that it's not part of all the other fruits, but it's separate, which means you recognize that as a separate item. You may say that since that spot it's very clear, b'miltei kamaita ka'ate. So the Ran and Ritva say that it means that it still holds the status of original thought, and it's not annul his original thought. So now it's considering as what? That he stored it in a separate location, and when he throw it to that spot, it's very clearly recognized as a separate spot. Kamash Melan, it's come to go by the end, which is even you recognize that item that it's different. Midezarke le'otzar batulei batla. The minutes he throw it to that spot, that annulled his original thought. So you see here a very beautiful analytic thought of all of this discussion, which apply to many avenues. The whole idea of going by original thought of a person, going by the action, going by a person change his mind, going by the status of the size of the item, going by the combination of this item with others, going by situation that the size reduce or increase. All of that remain in a way teiko. A question that left up in there, and how practical is it if you think together with me, is since you need, in order to make someone liable on Shabbat, to do both akira and anacha, you see here the fine line in a situation like that. When things are, not 100% clear, then is a very serious fine line to know what's make a person liable or what not. Now let's continue in the Mishnah. Hamotzi ochalein untanam al ha'iskupa. One who carries out food from his house on Shabbat and place it on the threshold, on the door. בין שחזר והוציאן, בין שהוציאן אחר פטור. Regardless if he carries it out from the threshold into the public domain or someone else carry it, he is exempt. Why? מפני שלא עשה מלאכתו בבת אחת. He did not perform his prohibition labor, which is from carrying from one domain to another, all at once, because it was a process that took place. If you remember, we explained many times the whole idea of Carmelite. It's a situation that is a special spot in a public domain that you can carry between that spot and the private domain, and the only one that put a prohibition is the sages. So therefore, if someone carry in between them, he is not liable for skila or karet, b'mezid, if he did it intentionally, or sin offering if he did it unintentionally. Next, kupa shehi mele'a perot. If one place a basket that is full of fruit, untana la eskopa achatzona, and he put it in the outer threshold. Outer threshold, what is it? Reshut harabim, it's a public domain. Af al pi sherov perot mibachutz patur. Even most of the fruits, it's outside, which is in a public domain, he is exempt. Why? Because some of that fruits, it's still inside. So therefore, Rashi said that carrying, it's only if he carried the entire item to the other domain. But if he did part of that, it's not. The GEMARA later elaborates on that. Ad שיוציא את כל הקופה, he is obligated only if, in other words, he is exempt. Let's go via the other way. He is exempt until he carries out the entire basket. GEMARA. The GEMARA asks a question. Hi iskupa mai. What does that mean when we said iskupa the threshold in Shabbat? Ileima iskupa reshut harabim. If you tell me that the threshold is what is in a public domain and it's not extend above the 9 handbreadth, and so if it's in that area of Carmelite, which is 4 handbreadth, so it's suitable for use by the many people. So you call it, now it changes Reshut harabim, and it's a public domain, and therefore patur, exempt. He says, Hakama pik bershut hayachid lershut harabim, but still he carries from private domain to public domain. Ela iskupa reshut hayachid. You have to say that this threshold is considering as a private domain, which is the size is a 10 hands cube by 4. Ben shechazar veotzian. Regardless if he again put it carries it out from the threshold to public domain, or ben shotzian acher patu, or if someone else did it, he's exempt. Hakamapik mirshut hayachid lershut harabim, but because eventually he's carrying food from the private domain to public domain. So the GEMARA concluded, Ela iskupa Carmelite. You have to say that the iskupa is in a Carmelite which is higher than 3 to 9 tfachim handbreds, and the rochav, it's a 4. So, and it's no roof on that Carmelite. So they said here, ve'akamashmalan, what we learn, tama denach beCarmelite. all the reason that we say that he is liable, it's because he's resting a Carmelite. So that's the reason that makes him exempt, because it's set he rests in a Carmelite before he put it in a public domain. Halonach beKarmelit mechayev. But if it's not rest in Carmelite, he's liable, because that we don't say mehalech keomed. If one walk is the same status as someone who's standing. So the Mishnah wants to tell us that mehalech lav keomed, that someone who's walking doesn't have the same status as someone who's standing. So as long as he walk, it's one status. So matnitin delo keben azai. So the Mishnah, he is not going by the Ben Azai who is taught in the Braita. The Tanya motzim mechanut leflatya derech stav chayav. We learned it early, if you remember, that if someone carries from one store, which is a private domain, to the roundabout, for example, or it's a very large spot in a public domain, derech stav, he goes by the area that people loaded and unloaded, and it's and there's a spot that people, all the merchants are sitting there, which is the status of Carmelite. So because most of the people, all the pedestrian that walking, they don't walking toward that area, because that area is a special occasion only for the merchants to loaded and unloaded their merchandise. So, and people go there only to buy things, but not to stand and assemble, right? So it's not considering a public domain, but they have the status of Carmelite. So they said, so therefore he is liable, chayav. Why? Because we're considering that carrying from private domain to public domain, without in between the staff, the Carmelite, that he passed through.
So he can move it himself after setting it down.
Yes.
So is there any time frame that he has to set down, or just for a split second and then pick it back up and move on?
Yeah, but I tell you deeper. The Ben Azai meant to say that the whole idea of mehalech keomed, that someone who's standing has the same status as someone who's walking, because each and every time that he do one step with his body and his item on the body, the minutes he put his legs down, he is exempt, because he didn't do it in one time from private domain to public domain, only toward this special area. So that's item in that sense is itself considering a Carmelite. So even a split second, it's it's enough. Kupa shehi mele'ah. So we said in the Mishnah, if one placed a basket that is full of fruits on outer threshold, he's only liable for carrying the entire basket. Amar Chizkiya lo shanu. Chizkiya said that what we study in the Mishnah, that apply only ela bekupa mele'ah kishuim udluim. That's apply only to a basket that is full of cucumbers and gourds, but because it's a long one, and some of them doesn't have a full fruits. Aval mele'ah chardal chayav. But if it's a basket was full of mustard, of seeds, so he's liable for carrying out a measure of individual mustard seed to the public domain. Alma kasavar eged kli lo shmei eged. So we learn from that he hold that the fusion of several objects in a single vessel is not considered as one fusion. So they said here, Rashi explained, and also it's Rabbeinu Hananel, that in regard to carry on Shabbat from one domain to another, it's as long as it's not outside fully. So we're not considering a Yatzah, but I highly urge you to see the Rambam in Hilchot Shabbat, chapter 12. He explained clearly what is the status of fusion of what not. Anyway, Rabbi Yochanan disagreed, and he said, Afilu mele'ah chardal patur. He said even as a full of mustard is exempt. as long as part of the vessel is inside. Alma kasavar, it means that he thought, eged kli shmei eged. He holds that the fusion of several objects in a single vessel is considering fusion. אמר רבי זרע, מתניתין דלא כחזקיה דייקה ולא כרבי יוחנן דייקה. Our Mishnah is not going precisely, neither one, not כרבי יוחנן כחזקיה. How? כחזקיה לא דייקה דקטנה עד שהוציא את כל הקופה, תמה דכל הקופה, כל הפירות פטור. The Mishnah said that that's apply only if he carried the entire vessel. But if only the fruits itself, but the vessel, at least partially, it's not there, it's inside, which means he takes enough from this weak vessel until all the fruits inside it's already outside, but some is inside. So it means it's not fully, so he's exempt. Alma kasavar, eged kli shmei eged. So it means that he hold that the entire the fusion of several objects in a single vessel is considered fusion. Why? Because the vessel fuses the fruits into one entity, while part of the basket remains inside. So already extension of the fruits is considering it's like it's still an inside. Ki Rabbi Yochanan lo daika. Now we go the other way around. We're not going to Rabbi Yochanan. Why? Dektane, because he teaches af al pi sherov perot bachutz, even most of the fruits is outside, he is exempt. Why? Tama derov perot. It's because most of the fruits is outside. Ha kol haperot af al gav de agida kupa migavai chayav. But if it's all the others, even he tight all the vessels together, he is liable. Alma kasavar eged kli lo shmei eged. It means that the fusion of this vessel is not considering a fusion. Ve'elakashas, now it's a contradiction between the two. Each one of these sages explain each of his thought. He said until he carried the entire vessel, that's apply that is only with its field of cucumbers, for example, that the length it's filled the entire vessel, and because it's entire vessel, it's almost impossible that all of them will be outside without the vessel itself. But if it's a field of master's seed, it's like someone who carries the entire vessel and is obligated, liable. Rabbi Yochanan מתרץ לטעמי אף על פי שרוב פירות בחוץ. So he is exempt even most of the fruits are outside. ולא רוב פירות בלבד, אלא אפילו כל הפירות בחוץ. It's not only some of the fruits, but even all of them. Why? Because they are tight earlier in that vessel, עד שיוציא את כל הקופה, until he takes the entire vessels. מיטיבי, now we ask a question, מוציא קופת החוכלים. If someone takes those who carries a merchant's basket, that it usually carries a fragrance, different items, primarily spices. Untanam alaskis kopa chitzona, and on Shabbat he places it on the outer threshold of the house. Afal pisherov minim bachutz patu. Even though most of the types of the items of the basket is outside, he is exempt. Ad shiutzit kol hakupa, until he carries out the entire basket. Kasar kadatach bitzrare. So now we explain what does that mean. You tell in mind let's refer to the basket that is bundled in different spices. V'kasher leChizkiah. Now how Chizkiah explained it? Because he said that even though most of the bundles enter the public domain is exempt, so he said that fusion is not considering a fusion. So how Amar Chizkiah Chamasken Be'ur Nasi. Chizkiah said that it's talk about stalks. So the spices are from stalks that fill the entire length of the basket. So he holds that as long as even part of the basket is inside, part of each stalk remain inside as well. Agonev kis b'Shabbat. If someone stole a wallet on Shabbat from the house owner to where? To a public domain. Chayav, he is liable to pay for stealing. So now even he is chayav mita for what? For carrying that basket on Shabbat from one domain to another. He is not exempt from paying. It's a concept that we said, kimlei biderama minein. Kimlei biderama minein, meaning you always go, if you do something that obligated you for monetary payment, and meanwhile you do something that you have a capital punishment, so the capital punishment exempt you from monetary payment. It's called kimlei biderama minein, right? Because if someone, for example, steal and kill, since you put him on the electrical chair, you don't ask him to return the money that he stole. In other words, the severe punishment, it's overlap or supersede the small punishment. Okay? That's kimlei biderama minein. שכבר נתחיל בגניבה קודם שיבוא לידי איסור שבת. Because the minute that he lift up that basket in the house of the owner, he is in a way now transfer the ownership to himself, to the thief himself, and he is obligated to pay. So, and at that very moment, he is not obligated of mitain for violating Shabbat. So, היה מגרר ויוצא, but if he carries it and walk outside, פטור, שהרי איסור גניבה ואיסור שבת באים כאחד, because both the stealing and violating of Shabbat come together. So, there's a very famous GEMARA in Ketubot 31. I wish to have the time, but have all the discussions over what exactly kimlei biderama minein and how we hold. If you tell me that the fusion is considering a one, so even he carries it, kadim leisur gneva leisur Shabbat, that the stealing, it's before the violating of Shabbat. So how come you hold in that domain that he'll not liable until the entire purse entered the public domain? So the GEMARA answered and they said, if the thief carried that basket outside of the house, derech piv, toward his mouth, which is, for example, if he opened that mouth, not the thief, it means the basket mouth, right? And he opened toward outside, hachename, he is basically transferring ownership, because he is now liable. In other words, the thief is, for that sake, is the owner. Why is the owner? Because he's now responsible for what he's doing. Hacha b'maya skinan, what we're speaking about, the apke derech shulav, that he carries out by what? But the underside of the purse. Since none of the money is accessible until the entire purse is in the public domain, he violates the prohibitions simultaneously. So the GEMARA asked, Va'ika makom halama. So they said, but isn't that the area of a sin? So he can go to get the access to the money, even he drag it out the purse to away of its underside. The by mapkale veshakilu, just few lines in 92. Naska, if he wishes to tear and take the money. So they said, so here is referring to long metal stripes. This is a naska, it's a long one. וכיוון דאיקה שנצים מפיק ליד פומי ושרה ושקיל ושנצים אגידה מגווי. So since he removed the content of the purse and the laces remain bound inside, so it does not have a license in, does not have laces. So if you wish, so they said the leika shnatzin. Here they said that it doesn't have a laces in that pocket. Or if you wish, you say that instead of referring to the case where there's a laces, you can say that they wound around the purse. One who stores seeds for sowing, for example, medical purposes, or a sample, is liable for carrying out any amount of those seeds for those purposes on Shabbat. However, others are liable only if they carry out the halachic measure that we said at the liability of Shabbat, such as Goget, or if he forget for what purpose he did it. So they said if he carries out the Shabbat, he is liable for carrying out any amount, because when he carries out, he has in mind the intention that he had when he stored it. And that's the Rambam Hilchot Shabbat, chapter 18. Now, we said that if it's the situation that it changed, like pachot migugeret shetavcha, gugeret shetzamka, if it's less than dry fig bark, or the dry fig bark was shivered, etc., so he is exempt. Now we say that another halacha, we explain that if he zarak kezai truma lebayit tameh, one throw a olive bark to truma in the impure house. So in a very general, the Magid Mishna said in the Hilchot Shabbat chapter 18 that that it's a dilemma, because because if that, considering it's independent or is a part of a mitzaref, that it's a joint other food there, it's unsolved, it's still a question mark. Now we said we talk about hagonev kis b'Shabbat, if one steals a person Shabbat. I think that's interesting. Halacha is the Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat 351. If one lifts an object in a private domain with the intention of stealing, and then he carries it into a public domain on Shabbat, is required to repay the owner for the stolen object, even though he is also liable for performing labor on Shabbat. The halacha is ruled in this way because the transgressor was liable for the theft when he lifted the object, but he did not perform the prohibition labor until he carried it out into the public domain. So it's also, if he was dragged it out on the ground and existing that domain, is the same halacha.